Hey guys, it's Susan. Welcome back to my channel, Hot Mess Quilter. It's been a couple of weeks. I've been on vacation. Spent a few days in Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. Truly a trip of a lifetime. And jet lag is real, so ignore the bags you see under here. So today what we're going to do is we're going to finish up putting our quilt top together. So remember the last video, I actually had laid out all of my half square triangles into rows. So now all we're going to do is stitch those rows together and make ourselves a quilt top. So I'm starting with my bottom row because it was just easier for me to grab at first. So remember, if you remember, I laid the quilt out, made some final adjustments, and then I numbered each row. I put the pin at the top so I know that it goes this way, not this way or this way. So I hope that you guys were able to do that too. All right, so I have this laid out so that my first piece is my first block, and I am going to attach the second piece to it. So I have two blocks. We're going to go right sides together on those. Right sides together. You can certainly pin it if you want to. I am not going to. I'm going to set this up for a 1/4 inch seam down the side. So here we go. I'm using that seam marking tape that I showed you in one of the videos. I'm using a piecing stitch of 3.5 and 2.2. Actually I'm going to change that because I actually like a little smaller stitch. So 3.5, 1.8. All right, and I'm using leaders this time instead of cutting the thread with each piece. So it's just a little scrap piece that I stitch right into there. It's really handy if you don't have a built-in thread cutter, okay? All right, so I've got my first two blocks together, as you can see. Now I'm going to attach the third one. So I have it in the correct orientation. I'm going to make sure I leave it in the correct orientation. And I'm going to put right sides together. Pin it if you want to. There really isn't any matching seams in this quilt, which is amazing. That just comes with experience and doing it over and over. And I'll tell you, I'm not a perfectionist. So if you're looking for someone to teach you how to be perfect, I am not your girl. I am the Hot Mess Quilter. All right, 1/4 inch seams. Okay, I need another leader here. Leaders and enders is what these are called. It's especially helpful if you're trying to stitch along a corner, and then that way your corner doesn't get sucked into your machine. Okay, so I've got 3 pieces put together. So cute. Let's do the fourth one. Same thing, right sides together. Are you starting to see how this is working? We'll finish this row. We'll move on. Okay. And don't worry if it doesn't match up perfectly. See, some of mine look a little bit bigger than others. That's okay. You can just kind of center it on there the best you can. Also, one of my materials has a little bit of stretch to it, so it's going to make mine a little wonky. And if you're unsure about your ability to keep it nice and straight, pin it. I was working on a piece last night that I had to pin because the pieces were so tiny that I thought for sure I would be messing up. Okay, let's cut that one off. All right, we got 2 together. Next one. Right sides together. You know what's great about using these leaders and enders? It also helps you to remember which is the top and which is the bottom. All right, 2 more to go in this row. And we've got row 1 or 8, if you're like me, completed. Okay, I've got row 1 complete. Stitch off your leaders. Take your piece of tape or whatever you were using to make sure that you keep your row in the right orientation. I'm going to use my pens. All right, let's do the rest of them. Okay, so we have all our rows sewed together. So here's my first row and my second row. We are going to put these together, right sides together, all right? So just like we did when we were stitching all those individual blocks. You're going to put them right side together. Now, these are long rows, so it does get a little bit tricky. So it's nice if you have a little extra table space. So let's talk about how we're going to match these up. There isn't any real matching seams here, but I think you're going to be happier if you do this trick. So I've got my first block and my first block of each row facing each other. Now you see where this joins together. You see there's a seam on the front and a seam on the back. What I want to do is just try to match up those seams. So there's a trick, it's called nesting. If your seam is pressed this way on the front, it should be opposite on the back. You can actually feel the groove where those two kind of lock in place. It takes practice. I sometimes still struggle with feeling that. So what I do is just double check, look and make sure that these two edges are joined together. Do you see that they match up? This seam and this seam match up on the inside. So what I'm going to do is hold that real tight and pop a pin in it. Same thing with the second. All right, sorry, I'm like doing this backwards. All right, so I've got blocks 2. We're going to match those seams up. Nest them if you can. If you're having trouble, just take a peek and look. If they match up pretty close, you're good. Pop a pin in it. What I don't want you to worry about is, for now, that maybe these edges don't match up. I promise you, you did not cut your pieces straight. So do you see how much difference I have here? That's okay. I'm going to work it in as I sew. So no big deal. I'm not worried about trying to match up exactly. What I'm more concerned about is making sure that these blocks line up correctly. So let me show you one more time here. I've got the 2 seams. Those look actually matched up pretty good. So I'm going to see if I can feel the nest. I cannot. So I'm just going to eyeball it. All right, let's nest those seams again. Sometimes I can feel it better than others. This one actually feels pretty good. I'm going to take a peek. Yeah, it lined up fairly good. We're not going for perfection here, guys. I just want you to make sure that your seams are close. So I've got rows 1 and 2 put together here. Okay, so now we're going to sew rows 1 and 2 together. All right. Don't poke yourself with a pin. I'm going to try to start with a nice straight edge, line them up as best as I can. All right, and we're going to start sewing these rows together. I've got my leaders and enders ready. We're again using that 1/4 inch seam. So I'm coming up to the seam on the second block. I'm going to slow down, take out my pin, and stitch that. Now I want to point out that these 2 blocks do not line up. The one on the bottom is much longer than the one on the top. I don't want to stretch the material. I don't want to force it. So what I'm going to personally do is just line up that bottom block along that 1/4 inch guide and just sew. I know it's going to seem like the seam isn't very wide on the piece of material that's on the top, but I promise you, when we're done and we quilt this thing together, it's going to be holding together just fine. Now, if you're finding that your blocks are like, let's say for instance, severely different, you're probably going to have to make some adjustments because your 1/4 inch seam may not catch that top piece of material at all. So that's something to be mindful of. I do want to try to make sure all my seams are laying flat, that I'm not stitching them wackadoodle. Okay, this block's a little crazy. So, and actually not only is the bottom half sticking out more than the top, it's crooked. So I'm looking ahead to my next block, which is aligned pretty well. And because I use this seam tape that runs down, I can come down here and start looking and making sure that I'm getting that good 1/4 inch seam. I hope that makes sense. Honestly, people, I just want you to get it put together, you know? We're not going for perfection. I never do. I will never enter a quilt into like a competition or anything. These are just for me, for friends, for family. Okay, so I've zoomed in a little bit. Hopefully you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. I'm just coming up on this seam, nested seam. So I'm going to slow down and pull the pin out. Okay, so now you might be able to better see what I'm talking about. See how this block on the bottom is uneven. I can try to put it together a little bit, but I don't want to stretch that material. But I can see if I can improve the alignment of the 2 pieces. It's still off a little bit, so again, I'm going to use the bottom material as my guide to get that 1/4 inch seam. Sorry if I'm repetitious here, but I'm just trying to help you along. Okay, we're going to slow down. Pull that pin out. And I'm going to line up these last 2 of rows 1 and 2. These should be pretty good. Yeah, they are. All right. And I left my stickers in place, my pins in place. So if you're using stickers or tape or whatever, leave them in place. All right, so now we're going to go grab row 3 and attach it to 1 and 2. You could go ahead and do 3 and 4 together and attach them that way. So just some options here. So I've got row 3 here, ready to attach to rows 1 and 2. And I'm going to do the same technique that I did earlier. We're going to go through and align all those seams together, not worrying so much about if these edges line up perfectly, because we can make adjustments as we go, okay? So nest your seams if you can, pop a pin in it. And if you've never made a quilt before, or you've done very basic quilts before, remember this is all just part of the learning practice. Okay, I'm going to line those edges up. That seems really bulky right there. Okay. Now, once we get this quilt top completed, we are going to finish it without using batting. What? I know. I don't want anyone to get overwhelmed. We're going to finish it with a simple pillowcase technique, and we're going to finish it using some nice soft flannel. I actually will show you both ways. I had some leftover pieces to this quilt, so I kind of made a small baby blanket, not even a doll blanket size. And so I'm going to show you both ways when we're ready to complete. So don't get too scared. I've got options. All right, the last one, I'm going to nest those seams together. So I have row 3 attached now to row 1 and 2. And we're going to come in here and do the same thing we've been doing. Line up my edges the best I can. These actually lined up very well. 1/4 inch seam. Start stitching away. Coming up on that pin. I'm going to slow down. Took the pin out, so I want to make sure I hold that butted up seam together as good as I can. Okay, my edges are lining up pretty good this time. All right, coming up on that nested seam. I'm going to slow down a little bit and take a look at this next piece. So now, a lot of fabric underneath. Like this bottom block is a lot bigger than the top. So if I don't address this right here and now, we're going to have little folds and stuff on our quilt that we don't want. So what I'm actually going to do is scoot this bottom piece in a little bit and put a few pins in here. So this bottom material is bigger than the top, is basically what I'm saying. Your feed dogs will help to take up that extra material. But I'm going to add extra pins because I'm just trying to kind of space that apart myself, even it out, so that I don't have a bunch of bulk at one end or the other. All right, so lining it up the best I can. I'm doing it this way because I don't want any unnecessary folds in my quilt. That's not even the word I'm looking for. Okay, coming up on that nested seam, I'm going to slow down a little bit and we're going to take a look at this next one. We'll do some lining up here without stretching. If it's wonky, remember that's okay. Just use the bottom material as your guide. Okay, so I'm coming up where the bottom is sticking out over my 1/4 inch guide. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and look at the next block because it's lined up pretty well. So that's how I know I'm keeping that 1/4 inch seam, is by looking down here instead of up here. That's the beauty of the tape technique, honestly. And there are some really good videos out there on how to get the perfect 1/4 inch seam. Okay, get that seam sewn in. All right, now let's take a peek. Last block of the row. It's Actually, it's lined up pretty good. Not too bad. It's off a little on the bottom. There have been times when I've sewn and not caught both pieces of material in the seam and had to go back and either hand stitch it or get it back under my needle and do it that way. So just know, things happen. Okay, so through the magic of editing, I have sewn all my strips together except this last one. What I ended up doing was sewing them in pairs and then attaching row 3 and 4 to 1 and 2, 5 and 6 to 4, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, you'll figure it out. If you want to do it row by row, that's okay too. I just find it gets kind of bulky. So we are on the last row, attaching the last couple of sections together. And then, by golly, we're going to have a finished quilt top. Now, I feel it's starting to pull a little bit. It's long in my lap, it's long on the side, so just make some adjustments so that you don't feel that your material is dragging, because that'll help you prevent wonky blocks. All right, coming up on the end, I'm going to slow down, pull this pin out, and go over that nested seam. And we're going to finish up this top. There's no need to backstitch, if you've noticed, when you start and stop with quilting. You don't backstitch because it's going to be quilted. It's all going to be secured. Okay. So let me figure out how to show you this finished top. Okay, so more or less in my tiny little room, this is what we've got. The Carpenter Star. Sorry, I'm trying to get good light on it. There really is no great way to do it. All the rows are put together. Let's get some up close stuff. Now you can see where the corners, the nested pieces that we did come together pretty good. Not perfect on the pinwheel, but I'm okay with it. There's some more. So that's why it's important to line those up, because you're going to like the overall finish look better. So once you get all your rows completed, then I want you to go ahead and iron the quilt. Make sure that you go over to my Facebook page and follow and like me there. I often will share other hints and tips and suggestions for you. So now it is time to get this thing pressed. In the next video, we will talk about how we're going to finish it. Square it up and finish it. So until next time, here's our cute little Carpenter Star. It's adorable. Okay, so I am doing a little pressing on this, so you'll want to do this too. And by pressing, what I mean is you're holding the iron on the seams before you kind of stretch it out. Here's what happens when I iron. So if I'm ironing, see how I'm pushing the material and stretching it? We don't want that. What we want is just to flatten those seams out. I'm trying to do this one-handed, sorry. Flatten those seams out and get all those seams nice and flat.